So we've talked about step 9, particularly the promises that go with step 9 and the willingness to make these amends, to make them right. And the book then, on page 84 of the big book, it says this thought brings us to step 10. Well, what thought? Well, the thought of this making amends and of course the promises that we just discussed. Brings us to step 10, which suggests that we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. Very, very often I hear people, and it's not a big deal, they talk about at the end of the day taking their 10th step inventory. That inventory actually is the 11th step, not step 10. Step 10 definitely says as we go along. So what does that mean? What does it mean as we go along? It means during the day, as we're going about our business, we continued to take inventory. Step 4, we continued to take inventory and to set right any new mistakes. So we're actually doing, as we go through the day, we're going to be doing steps 4 through 9. It becomes a way of life. We've vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. So as I'm still doing step 9, because some of these amends, they may take some time, and there are people who it may be difficult to make this amend to. People are going to be cropping up. You know, I had an experienced man, I'd been sober for about 12 years, and someone who I never even had on my resentment list, I had forgotten completely about until I met him in a grocery store and realized that, oh man, I did something to hurt this guy. It was pretty bad, and it was a long time ago, but it was a physical thing, and I need to make amends to this guy. So we have to understand that this amends process, new people from our past may pop up that we need to make an amend to. So it says, as we cleaned up the past, or in other words, while we're cleaning up this past, we're now going to watch for, on a daily basis, or as we go through the day, for any new mistakes that we've made. It tells us then that we have entered the world of the Spirit. What does that mean to us? Think about that. We've entered the world of the Spirit. We've entered into a place that we've probably never been before. We've entered into it. We've came from being totally separated from God to walking with Him. It's now just a part of our being. We've entered into this world with God, rather than that old world and being separated from God. So, and then it says our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. So, to grow, we're not going to jump from here to here. Now we've entered this world of the Spirit, but I still have work to do. I still have growth in the areas of understanding and being effective. Remember we talked about it, that back in step 7, to be of service to God and to others. Step 9, and we didn't cover that, but it said one of the reasons for step 9 is to be of maximum service to God and to others. So we're going to grow in that effectiveness through this process. It says this is not an overnight matter. And now it's going to talk about the 4 spiritual principles that we need to live by and that need to be a part of our life. So the first one, it says continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. So as I'm going through the day, the first principle is to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Then it says the second principle then is when these crop up, We ask God. So the second principle is to ask God at once to remove them. So to ask God means to pray. So as I'm going through the day, if any of these things crop up, I'm going to stop and pray. To ask God to remove them. Then it says we discuss. So the third principle is to discuss. To discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. So I'm going to watch, pray, and discuss and make amends immediately. I'm not going to wait until tomorrow. If I've harmed you, I need to make it right now. Then the fourth principle says, then we resolutely turn, so to turn our thoughts to someone we can help. So if I'm watching for, if during the day selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear crop up, I'm watching for that. One of them crops up, I'm going to ask God to remove them. I'm then going to call someone or talk to someone, make amends, to make it right, if possible, to do that immediately. And then I'm going to turn my thoughts to someone I can help. I'm immediately going to try to help someone else. And if you notice in here, it doesn't say that I need to help other alcoholics or addicts necessarily. It says to help someone. And that could be anyone. You know, for me it was going to the hospital, volunteering at the hospice unit, to just talk to people. It could be going to a nursing home. Excuse me, I've heard of people going to the animal shelter to walk the dogs or to clean up pens, whatever it may be. We immediately turn our thoughts to someone that we can help. It says love and tolerance of others is our code. So look where this journey has taken us so far. From the insanity of our addiction, of our alcoholism, to being totally selfish, self-centered, full of fear, anger, self-pity, to love and tolerance of others. This is now our code. Isn't that something? And this can happen in such a short period of time if we're willing to do these things. Dr. Bob literally covered those first 9 steps in one day. That the second day, he was out on another binge. He was driving around town making amends to people. That afternoon, he met Bill D., the third alcoholic. So within one day for Dr. Bob, I'm not suggesting that anyone could possibly do all of this in a day, but this thought that it's going to take a long time to get this way, it's just not here. It'll happen as quickly as I allow it to happen. But the promises of the big book that meant the most to me were, these are called the 10th step promises. So I'm doing step 10, and here's the result. We have ceased fighting anything or anyone. This is on the bottom of page 84 onto page 85. We've ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. We will find this has happened automatically. So sanely and normally. Way back in step 1, we talked about being allergic to cats. And if you have an allergy towards cats, what would be the sane and normal thing to do? Don't buy a cat. So look what's happened here. By this time, now, if tempted, So here it's telling us we're going to be tempted. If tempted, we react sanely and normally. No thanks, I have an allergy. Don't pet the cat. It's so simple. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. And I have to take this because one of the things I know in my final treatment was all these relapse triggers that I had to identify. You know, for me, by the time I got into treatment for my last time, I could have filled up an entire notebook of relapse triggers, like a hangnail, a light bulb being burnt. I mean, all of it could have been a relapse trigger. Couldn't possibly identify them all or avoiding it. What is it telling us here? We're not even avoiding temptation. We don't need to. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We haven't even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Let's go back up here to steps 2 and 3 again. What was our problem? First of all, our dilemma was that I had no power. Back in step 2, purpose of this book. So here it's telling us the problem has been removed. I have power. Step 3 told us that the root of our problem was selfishness, self-centeredness, and it was driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. The problem has been removed. I'm no longer selfish, self-centered, driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, or self-pity. It's gone. The result of that, now I can react sanely and normally. The problem has been removed. It doesn't exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's our experience. That's how we react as long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. We just talked about our spiritual condition back here in step 10. 4 spiritual principles. To watch for, we're going to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. If they crop up, we're going to pray to have them removed. We're going to talk to someone about them, and we're going to turn our thoughts to someone we can help. That's my spiritual condition. As long as that's fit, as long as I continue to do that, these step promises are real in my life. But it says then it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. What does it mean to rest on our laurels? Our laurels are our reputation or things that we've done in the past. So I've gotten to this point, it's easy to stop and just not continue to work. But we're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Again, watching out for those 4 principles. Your will be done, not mine. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower all along this line all we want. It's the proper use of His will. So these musts, I must of God's will into all these activities. What's God's will? We get so confused sometimes with what God's will is, and we're thinking all this, well, I'm not really sure. Of course we do. God's will is that we not be selfish, that we not be dishonest, that we not have resentments, that we not feel sorry for ourselves, that we not walk in fear. That's God's will for our life. God's will, not ours. So when we take a look at where we've been in these steps, if we're willing to do the work, this recovering from alcoholism, or to be a recovered alcoholic, is so simple. It just requires some hard work. It is not complicated or confusing. The next paragraph says that much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him, from God, who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go farther, and that means more action. But sixth sense is to be God conscious. What does that mean? Where God is just present in all that we do. Takes us right into more action. That means step 11, which suggests prayer and meditation. Back in the how it works, step 11 specifically says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So, to pray is to talk to God. And, you know, a lot of people are probably no different than me. I love to talk. I'm not real crazy about his listening. This suggests prayer and meditation. To meditate is to listen. So I'm not only going to talk to God, but I'm going to listen to God. And that's such a huge part of this. It talks about, you know, this listening to God, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we, and how to know if it's God that we've heard from. But we're getting to this step 11, and remember back in step 10, I said that daily, or that inventory that we take at night, that list, it's step 11. So here it is. It says, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? So step 10, we're doing this as we go along. Step 11, we're checking it out at the end of the day. Have I missed something? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind or loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? We must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. So I'm going to, before I go to bed at night, I'm going to turn the TV off a half an hour early. Number one, got that clicker, shut it off. I'm going to review my day. I'm going to look for resentment, selfish, dishonest, or afraid. Do I owe an apology? But what am I going to do about it? The first thing, I'm going to ask God's forgiveness. Then, I'm going to ask God what corrective measures should be taken. What do I do about this? I was selfish today. I didn't catch it, or I didn't do it as I was going through the day. How do I make this amend? Then it says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. One of the thru my time as a counselor and working in a treatment center, and I had the opportunity to do some aftercare or continuing care groups. One of the challenges that I would make to the group would be to just do one or two simple little things. For 1 month, turn the TV off a half an hour early and review your day. Get up a half an hour earlier the next morning and plan your day. If so many people are, the alarm goes off, they roll out of bed, they brush their teeth on the way to the coffee pot, they grab a cup of coffee, and out the door they go and are headed off for work. If that's your day, you're going to react to everything for that day. Plan your day rather than react to it. In doing that simple little exercise, there was not a group or an individual who did that exercise who didn't come back and say, wow, what a difference it made. Sleep better at night, feel rested, plan for the day. Just made an incredible difference in their daily activities. So, and that's for, I believe, for anyone, not just the alcoholic or addict. It would be a much, much better way to live. But it says we consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. So in the morning, I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask God to direct my thinking, especially that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. When I do that, I just become much more conscious of God's presence, of, that as I go through the day, by asking Him in the morning, please help me to not be selfish. And again, God isn't going to take away our selfishness from us. It's something we need to give ourselves. But it is going to make me much more conscious to not be selfish or dishonest or resentful. There's a simple little exercise, and I heard this from a friend down in Phoenix, Arizona, who does many of these 12-step seminars. And he challenged me to do a simple little exercise that for a 24-hour period, go through the day, everything you do, to just simply say before you do it, your will be done. God, your will be done. And to, at the end of that 24-hour period, what kind of day did you have? A simple little exercise. And unbelievable, when we're not selfish, dishonest, when we're living the way God would have us to live here, we have a good day. We have great days. So one little exercise that can really change the way our days go. We really want to have that spiritual experience first. Just a few things on step 12. And again, the working with others, and I believe being a sponsor is a part of this. I believe that anyone who comes into recovery really is just a sponsor in training. That the minute you stop drinking and begin working these steps, you're just learning how to be a sponsor. So the end result of this is that we're going to sponsor someone. But some things with this step 12 that I believe we just need to talk about a little bit. And again, there's like 10, 12 pages on this. For the alcoholic or the addict, you know, we pretty well have most of this down by the time we get here, but very specific ways on working with other alcoholics or addicts. Page 91. Let's take it a step back. Page 90. When you discover a prospect for AA, find out all you can about him. So the first thing I'm going to do is find out everything I can about this person. If they do not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade them. And I think back particularly early in my recovery, all the time I wasted on people who didn't really want to stop drinking. All the preaching I did, all of that. It was just really a waste of time. Then it says, if there's any indication that that person wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him. So I'm not going to start out by talking to him. I'm going to talk to someone who may be most interested in him. Usually his wife. The things I'm going to do, I need to get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his or her place, to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. So I'm going to go to a family member, if possible, and really try and learn everything I can about that person. What are his behaviors, his religious leanings, all of this stuff. One of the questions I need to ask, and I will often do, I get a lot of phone calls to help people. I may not be the right person to talk to him. If it's a a young person who, excuse me, who's into heavy metal and all of this kind of stuff, maybe I'm not the guy to talk to him. Maybe I can't put myself in his or her place. But I can, if I find out everything that I can about them. I probably know someone who would be a good person to talk to them. I get them in touch with them. But still I find out everything I can find out about him so that I can put myself in his place, and I always ask myself the question, how would I want to be approached? Page 91 tells us to see the person alone, if possible. After a while, we turn the talk to some phase of drinking. I first tell him about my drinking, my habits, symptoms, experiences, to encourage him to speak about himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. You'll get a better idea of how to proceed. If he isn't willing to talk, you simply give him the sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit. Don't say anything about how that was accomplished. One of the best things that we can do, and even as an alcoholic, particularly early in recovery, my tendency was to preach. Tell him what he should or shouldn't do. That you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to go to meetings, you need to... That person has probably heard that 1,000 times. Hasn't done any good. No. So why should I preach to him? I'm going to do a lot better off, a lot more good to listen to that person rather than to preach to him. And what I'm listening for are the little things that I can kind of hone in on then to get this person, or to convince this person of this simple program. We talk about, the step one part of alcoholism, about the illness, and that it's fatal, and we talk about the insanity. These are all things that person is going to understand. When we talk about, for me, in talking to a real alcoholic, when I mention the word blackout or insinuate a blackout, how often that person will, oh wow, this guy knows what a blackout is. He's experienced them. I have them all the time. That one little thing, and to have a blackout and come out of that blackout and immediately want to have another drink again. These are the things that alcoholic, that prospect, they're going to understand, and it's amazing how they'll open up then. For an alcoholic, for them to talk about a blackout to just anyone, it's not going to happen. They're just not comfortable with who would. If I'm talking to a person who's never experienced a blackout before and said, man, I lost 3 days, woke up in a town that I had no clue where I was, and they're not real willing to open up about that kind of stuff with just anyone. So your talk of some of the insanity, but stick to that type of talk. Don't push the spiritual end of it just yet. That time will come. The page 93, I think one of the real keys here, as we go through, and of course now we're going to be starting to talk about the spiritual aspect a bit, but 93, the main thing is that person be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he lived by spiritual principles. If they're not, the best thing you can do is, okay, I need to walk away from this right now. Be willing to help. Offer them your phone number, whatever it may be. If you want more help, give me a call. But right now, if they're not willing to believe in a power greater than themselves, there really isn't a lot of good to continue to try and take them through this program. And again, don't preach. You simply give that person your experience. Page 96 tells us, don't be discouraged if a prospect doesn't respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. We find it is a waste of time to keep chasing a person who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he can't recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and to be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half-dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. Alcoholics and addicts can be real time suckers. And especially if they're drinking, do not talk to an alcoholic when he's drunk. You wait until they get sober. The next morning, whatever it may be. Most of the time, they don't remember it anyway. So while they're drinking is not the time to talk about them. You're wasting your time. Don't spend too much time on a person who becomes very obvious that they're not willing to quit. For people who are willing to get well, on page 98, and a lot of this should, I believe, go to families, that little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Working in a treatment center, the thousands of times I've heard, and the thousands of times that families have given into, well, if I don't get a carton of cigarettes, I'm going to go. I'm leaving. I got to have that. I got to have that. You need to do this. You know what? What did we just hear here? The ones who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Whether you give it to them or not is probably not going to impact their sobriety at all. You're not doing them any good by giving it to them. We need to, page 99, and it talks, these next couple of pages, 98 and 99, talks pretty specifically about this, and especially with the alcoholic demanding something before they can get sober. It's just not true. But 99 is again, very, very important. Let no alcoholic say that he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. The alcoholic or addict will try to guilt the family into coming back. And way too often that family comes back too soon, just because of the guilt that this person can't recover unless I'm there to take care of them. Here we hear it. It's just not so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We have seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. So that family needs to make sure that if they're separated, that they not come back too soon, and most of all, that the alcoholic, if he says the only way he can get sober is for him to get his family back, he's putting his reliance on the family rather than on God, and in that case, this isn't going to work. He may stay sober for a time, but it's inevitable that they'll go back to drinking. Talks a little bit about, and I think to just touch on it, about where an alcoholic should or shouldn't go to. Page 101 says that our rule is to not avoid a place where there is drinking. We don't need to avoid it. We need to remember about that spiritual condition. Is my spiritual condition good for that day? If it is, I can pretty much go anywhere I want to go. My reason for not going to a bar has nothing to do with the alcohol that's at the bar. It's because of the bad attitudes that are at a bar. It's depressing. It's not fun. That's the reason I don't go to a bar. It has nothing to do with the alcohol. It says, if we have a legitimate reason for being there. So, there are certain times, there are certain events that would be considered a legitimate reason for being in a bar. You know, I can think of weddings, parties, business, things of that nature. It's okay for me to be there. I don't need to avoid it. I do need to check my spiritual condition, make sure it's good. But it does say, if I'm expecting to steal a little pleasure from the atmosphere of such a place, stay away. My purpose for being there isn't to get a little pleasure out of the drunken party that's going on. It just simply says, be sure you are on solid spiritual ground before you start, and what your motive in what, and that your motive in going is good. So if I have a good motive for going there, it's okay to go. My spiritual condition is good, it's okay to go. There may be times that I've called into a situation, a party, a bar, whatever, and I personally haven't had to go a sponsee to get them out of the bar, but I know that there are a number of people who have. Sponsee ends up in a bar, no wait to get out, need to go get that person out of there. If the motive is good, your spiritual condition is good, you can go anywhere if it's for the right reason. So you go to that bar, you get the person out, and you leave, and you're going to be okay. We don't have to be afraid to be tempted. So the beauty of these steps is, ending with this step 12, for me, 17 years ago, to imagine such a life that was just so gratifying, the ease of which, how easy it's been to not drink, the fun I'm having the time of my life by not drinking. These were things 17 years ago, or before I got sober, I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't imagine life without alcohol. To have gone through that change, I still work these principles. I do my inventory, still I go to bed, or turn the TV off a half an hour early at night. I still do all of those things. It's a way of life. What a great way of life. For the alcoholic, the addict, I think we have the greatest opportunity to be of maximum service to God than so many of those people we used to wish we could be like them and not be an alcoholic. I'm not grateful for the things that I did as a practicing alcoholic. I am just so grateful that my alcoholism forced me to be in a situation with God today that is just incredible. Sobriety for me has been one of the easiest things I've ever done. Thanks.